Welcome back to Accommodation Atlas. Okay, so you've requested a workplace accommodation, maybe ergonomic equipment, flexible hours, a quieter workspace, or the ability to take short breaks. And suddenly, the vibe gets weird. Pushback usually comes from one of three places. One, lack of understanding from your employer. Your manager might not know how the ADA works. Two, logistical worries. They're imagining disruptions to workflow. Three, fear of setting a precedent, aka, if I give it to you, I'll have to give it to everyone. Remember, pushback doesn't mean your request is wrong. It just means you might need to guide the conversation with your workplace. Before you go back into the conversation, let's take a second to prep. Let's do the prep checklist. Know your job duties, what's essential, what's flexible. Know your need, what's the functional limitation you're addressing. Know your request. Concise, specific, and tied to the job. Know your alternatives. One request is good, two or three options is better. You don't need to overshare medical info. In fact, you shouldn't. HR usually needs documentation, but your manager does not need private medical details. All right, what to say when you get pushback? Now we're at the moment of truth. Here are some actual scripts you can use. Save them, print them, use them however. Scenario 1, your manager says, "We don't do that." You can say, "I understand this might be new. I'm requesting this as a disability accommodation to help me perform my essential job duties. I'm open to discussing options that work for both of us." Scenario 2, manager says, "It'll hurt productivity." You can say, "I hear your concern. This accommodation will actually help me maintain consistent performance. I'm also open to exploring alternatives that support productivity." Scenario 3, manager tries to get personal. "So tell me more about what's wrong with you." You can say, "I prefer to keep my medical information private. HR has the documentation they need. What I can share is how this accommodation helps me complete my core tasks." Scenario 4, your manager delays or avoids the request. You can say, "I wanted to follow up on the accommodation request I submitted. Could you share what the next step is and who will be handling it?" This is professional speak for, "Hey, please stop ignoring me. Thanks." Scenario 5, HR says your request is not reasonable or not required. HR, "We don't consider this a reasonable accommodation, so we can't approve it." You can say, "Thank you for letting me know. Could you clarify what part of the request is considered unreasonable? I'd also appreciate guidance on what alternative accommodations would be considered reasonable so we can continue the interactive process. I'm open to exploring options that support both my needs and the essential functions of the role." Why this works? It signals you know they must engage in the interactive process. It keeps the conversation collaborative, and it pushes HR to give specifics instead of a blanket no. Example 6, HR asks for excessive medical information. HR, "We'll need your full medical records or diagnosis before we can proceed." You can say, "I'm happy to provide documentation from my healthcare provider that explains my functional limitations and need for accommodation. However, the ADA doesn't require full disclosure of my full medical history or diagnosis. I'd like to share the appropriate documentation while maintaining my privacy. Could you let me know what specific functional information you need to continue the interactive process?" Why this works? You show you're cooperative and not refusing documentation. You remind HR of the legal boundaries without sounding confrontational. You redirect the conversation to functional needs, which is what the ADA focuses on. And take a look at your state's laws. For example, in California, your employer cannot legally ask you what your diagnosis is. All right, if they still push back, what are some next steps you can take? If the conversation is still feeling like a ping pong match, here are your power moves. 1, put the request in writing. Email creates a paper trail. 2, loop in HR. That's literally part of their job. 3, keep a log of interactions, dates, comments, delays. 4, bring documentation from your provider, especially if HR asks. And 5, escalate if needed. HR, the employee relations team, or even the head of HR or CEO. And if things still don't move, that's when you talk to an employment attorney or disability advocate. Let's make the process collaborative, not combative. Here's the secret. The ADA is built on the idea of an interactive process. It's not supposed to be a fight, it's supposed to be a conversation. You don't need to apologize for needing support. You don't need to feel guilty. You're not asking for a favor. You're asking for a tool that lets you do your job well. If you found this helpful, give the video a like, drop your experience in the comments, and subscribe to Accommodation Atlas for more workplace rights, accommodations, and career tips delivered with a little humor and a lot of love. Stay empowered, advocate for yourself, and remember, you deserve a workplace where you can thrive.